It's HYLN video time, and we'll take a look at two more videos that Strongman Personal Finance did. But first, let's listen to what Thomas Healy has to say.
As I shared on the earnings call, where we were a year or two ago, the market was rewarding high revenue growth. Now, where we are today, the market is more rewarding path to profitability and making money on systems.
I'll do the usual commentary over Strongman's videos and go over two companies, Cummins and Generac. Both produce generators in different kind of capacities and see how they make money.
Seems to be trending up a little bit, okay? So at the end of the day, you want to look at earnings per share because you want to look at your earnings as an individual shareholder. Now, earnings per share goes up because the underlying total profit of the business has gone up, and or because the company's buying back shares. So if there's fewer shares outstanding, you get a bigger percentage of the profits. That's why companies do buybacks.
So when HYLN bought back shares, that means shareholders will get a larger portion of future profits. The problem is that HYLN doesn't generate revenue, nor does it have profits at this point.
You buy a business. How do you make money? Well, the business makes profits, it reinvests it, or they pay a dividend, which is cash being returned to you as the shareholder. That's all it is. Or they reduce the total ownership, the total float of the company, which means your percentage ownership of the company and all its profits, future profits, has increased. So this company is providing real returns. Okay, they are providing a real dividend and they are providing real share buybacks.
He has nothing to complain about with Cummins. He says that the dividends are real and the share buybacks are also real.
We see net sales is up very, very slightly. They had a very, very, very slight increase in sales. So this is not like at least recently, this hasn't been like a super revenue growing business. Their sales grew by 87.96, 863, by 1.8%. And their gross profit, which is their profit from just selling their engines and stuff, has grown by 2%. So their profits grew slightly faster than their revenue. Their gross profits did.
Now, unlike GE Aerospace and GE Vernova, he does not mention services with Cummins, because he mentioned with GE, services generate significantly more money than the sales of equipment. And he doesn't mention it for Cummins, so I'm guessing that Cummins makes sufficient revenue and profit off of their engines.
For a total operating income of $1 billion? Yeah, $1 billion in the last 3 months. So their operating margin, you take their operating income divided by their net sales, 12%. I mean, that's healthy. Nothing crazy there. Interest expense. So they make $1,000 in profit. Now, you as the stockholder, you don't get all the cash, all the profits, because the debt holders have to be paid first. So about 10% of the operating profits get eaten up by debt, leaving 90% for taxes and then to you. So then the government comes and gets their share, the government. And then finally, you as the shareholder get the net income attributable to Cummins of $726. So their bottom line profit that goes to the shareholder, basically about 27 or 25% of the operating profit gets taken by debt and government. Oh, what am I doing? 726 divided by 8796. So their bottom line profit margin is 8.25%. So, I mean, they're making money. Their earnings per share grew. They bought back shares. They're paying a dividend. This is, I mean, I've seen worse businesses.
So 8% is good enough for Cummins to be profitable, and they generate $1 billion in revenue each quarter. And that's after factoring in the overhead for running the facility, paying the workers, paying the government, etc., before the shareholders get their value out of it. And he only talks about the engines. He doesn't talk about Cummins generators, because that's what HYLN is making right now. But for HYLN to be sufficiently profitable, I mean, I'm kind of comparing apples and oranges here, but HYLN would have to at least make 8% margin off of their generators after you account for research development, paying the government and taxes, operations of the facilities, etc., before shareholders get their fair share. But HYLN needs to sell product to make that happen.
So where does most of their revenue come from? Well, roughly 58% of their revenue comes from America. And China is 87.96, 8.5%. And then other international, 28%. So basically, more than half of their revenue comes from the U.S., but they're globally diversified with a decent chunk outside of China and India.
Let's see what Strongman says about Generac. Generac produces residential and commercial generators, which is it's an edge case for HYLN. It's not their main focus at all, because they kind of shifted to customers will be continuously using the Carno generator and not relying on it for backup. But it's still something worth looking at.
Operating margin, that's a little bit more concerning. So their gross margin, basically they make the generator and they sell it. Okay. Just that cost, the revenue minus the cost to make the generator, that's the gross margin. That's the profit. But then you have other expenses. You have operating, you have selling, general administrative expenses, you have interest expense, you have tax expense. All of that comes after the gross margin. So if you look at their operating margin, they're having a little bit of trouble with operating expenses, it looks like. Okay, you can clearly see it's a massive decline. And their operating margins are getting squeezed.
I don't know if they're profitable or not, but he's noted that something is sapping away their profits for some reason.
They're buying back some shares, which increases your percentage of all the company's future profits. Okay, they got $218 million of cash, roughly the same as December 31st, 2023. This is as of June 30th, 2024. Receivables are up, $610 million of receivables. That's very liquid. And then they have a lot of inventory on hand. Like the vast majority of their current assets are inventories, half of it, roughly $1.1 billion of inventory.
So they're sitting on a bunch of product that they have not sold yet.
So liquid capital on hand, excluding inventory, and prepaids, which is immaterial, is roughly $830 million. Trade name. Okay, so basically they have a bunch of intangible assets. Actually, they have a lot of intangible assets. Okay. So basically what an intangible asset means is something that you can't touch. But intangible assets are something they're intangible. Like if you spend money on a patent.
And HYLN has quite a few patents.
Let's say you spend, like, you paying the lawyers and you file for the patent and blah, 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 blah. The costs are put on the balance sheet and they're spread out. They're not expensed in the year that the patent is paid for. So that's why you see these assets on the balance sheet. These are basically just future expenses is what these are. So net sales overall is flat year over year, and gross profit is up. So while their sales stayed flat, they were able to basically squeeze more profit out of the generators that they're selling. Selling expenses are up. How much are selling expenses up?
Now, when he talks about expenses, he actually refers to it as an expense because they have service warranties that if the engine breaks and if it's under warranty, they have to go essentially fix it for free, and it's not profitable when looking at this company. So each company has its own unique thing about them.
128. I mean, this could be anything. And service expenses. So it could be fixing generators, warranties is up 11%. R&D is up 23%. Okay, so yeah, see what I'm saying? It's a problem of operating expenses. So their profit just from selling generators is fine. But their operating expenses are growing faster than their revenues, which is hurting their profit from operations.
So their sales of generators and profits from them are fine, but for some reason, Generac has increased research and development 23% for some strange reason. So they're currently on the move doing research and development. Whereas if you think with HYLN is that they've essentially front-loaded all the research and development up front. And now it's time to see if they can actually sell generators and generate revenue and increase and bring in profits, which some of that will be distributed to shareholders, assuming that they do sell Carno generators.
That's what's really killing them there, okay? Because you'd expect if their gross profit went up and operating expenses didn't explode, they'd be doing fine. I mean, overall, not the worst thing in the world. I mean, if you just gotta, I mean, the vast majority of this company's business comes from people in the United States buying generators for their houses. That's basically where most of the revenue of this business comes from. And that's the booming part of the business. So if you're bullish on people buying freaking generators for their house and you think the market's underpricing the growth of that because our grid's about to fall apart.
I guess if you're bullish on HYLN, you're anticipating customers, or which are in the commercial and defense space, needing electricity for some reason, and there's not enough to go around. And I know recently, like there was a company that wanted to build a data center, and they happened to purchase a nuclear power plant. This is the second one I've seen do this. Microsoft, they purchased a nuclear reactor off of 3 Mile Island, which one of those reactors had a meltdown in the late 1970s, but there's still one good nuclear reactor, so they can leverage that for their upcoming data center, but they're going to have to wait 3 years to go through all the permitting and stuff. And I wonder if there's, I don't know, another company with some generators that can produce electricity. They just have to be able to create these generators and sell them. I guess that's the dream.